Good morning. Happy Tuesday. It's Hashem. Today we're learning the third Perek of Mishnah's Terumos. Today's shiur is sponsored by the Nishmas Aaron Nachum ben Simcha Cohen, Yeshua Mordechai ben Shepsel, Bracha Sar B'Shmoleb, and Binah Moshe ben Yosef ben Hashemas Havan Aliyah. Mishnah Aleph begins. Mishnah Aleph begins. HaTorem Kishos V'Nimsas Mara. If someone separated a cucumber as truma for other cucumbers, and it's later found to have been bitter, or avatiach v'nimsat seruach, or if he separated a melon as truma for other melons, and is later found to have been spoiled, truma yachsu yitrum. So it was a valid truma, but he must separate truma a second time from something else. Because ultimately, it was a worthless truma, but he got the mitzvah of doing truma, but he needs to do it again. In those cases, we're assuming that he didn't know that they were spoiled. If they were spoiled and he gave them anyways, then understandably that would not have been, that he would not be Yitzie, the mitzvah truma. Continuing on, if someone separates a barrel of wine as truma for other wine, and is later found to be vinegar, the law is that if it is now known that the contents of the barrel was already vinegar before he separated it as truma, ain't no truma. It is not a valid truma because, as he said a couple of days ago, wine and vinegar are considered two different types of produce, and therefore you cannot separate one from the other. But if it's known that it's soured only after he separated as truma, it was good wine, then it turned into vinegar later. Truma, and that's a valid truma because it was still wine when he separated it. Im safek, and if there's a doubt as to whether it became vinegar, truma, then it's also good truma because at the time that he separated it, it was wine. The yachzer yitrum, but he must separate truma again, because on the other hand, it might have been vinegar at the time that he separated it. We don't know for sure. The Mishnah continues, Harishona eno midamas b'fnei asma. If the first portion falls into ordinary produce by itself, does not make the mixture meduma. Meduma is a forbidden mixture of truma and ordinary produce. You can't mix the two because it's not butter. And non-kohanim who ate the first portion by mistake are not obligated to pay the extra fifth for it. And the same is true of the second barrel. It does not make the other produce meduma, and eating it does not carry the penalty of the fifth. Meaning that if someone eats truma by mistake, he must pay for what he ate, plus add a quarter of an additional portion as like a penalty for eating truma. It's really a fifth, but it's a fourth. So when you finish calculating, it's going to be you're going to have a total of 5, but really you're taking the whole content of what you ate and you're adding on an extra quarter, which makes it into a fifth of the new total amount. It's a monetary payment penalty for eating truma if you're not a kohen. Not Mishnah base. Nafla achas mihem chulin. If the liquid of one of the barrels fell into chulin, meaning that you have you have two you have a case where you have two portions, which one is wine and one is vinegar. They were designated as truma, but only one of them is actually truma, and we don't know which one. So the Mishnah now explains what happens if both of them fall into portions of chulin. If one or both of them fall into portion into chulin. So nafla achas mehem chulin. If the liquid in one of the barrels fell into chulin, eno midamasan. It does not make the chulin a forbidden meduma mixture. Nafla shniya l'makom acher. If the liquid in the second barrel fell into a different place, meaning to a different container of chulin, eno medamata. It too does not make that chulin a forbidden meduma mixture. But if the liquids in both of them fell into one place in the same container of chulin, they make the chulin a forbidden mixture with the amount of truma in the mixture calculated according to the smaller of the two portions. Meaning that since both portions fell into the chulin, and one of them is definitely truma, then the mixture becomes meduma. However, in order for the mixture to be permitted to non-kohanim, we do not require 100 times more chulin than both portions together. Only one portion is real truma. Furthermore, it's enough for the chulin to be 100 times greater than the smaller portion, and that's fine. In any event, Mishnah Gimel, Hashutvin. Now we're going to talk about. Now we're going to talk about a situation where two people share ownership of produce. One of them separates truma from all of it without the owner's knowledge, without the other guy's knowledge. So his separation certainly works for his own share of the produce. The question is whether it works for his partner's share as well. So Mishnah Gimel begins. In a case where two partners separated truma for all of their jointly owned produce, one after the other, Rabbi Akiva says, "Truma shnehem truma." Both of their trumas are valid. That the truma designation by each person is effective for his own share, but not for his partner's share, because the partner wants to separate truma for himself for the portion that he owns. The Chachamim say, "Trumas harishon truma," that the truma of the first partner is valid for all of that produce, and so the truma designation by the second partner is meaningless. Their rationale is that if partners working together, then one partner is not going to object to having the second one give truma for the entire crop. I mean, that's part of the business. One guy does this, one guy does that. As long as it's taken off together, then and they're sharing responsibilities, then that would be a normal thing in business. Rabbi Yossi clarifies what the view of the Chachamim was. He says, "In Taram Harishon Kishir, if the first partner separated the regular amount of truma from both of their shares, which is 1/50th of all the produce, it is truma for all of the produce. And truma sasheni truma, and the truma of the second partner is not truma at all, as the Chachamim said above. The in low Taram Harishon Kishir. However, if the first partner did not separate the standard measure of truma, meaning he separated less than 1/50th, so we assume that the second partner would not want that portion to be the truma for his share because he wants to give the standard measure. Truma says sheni truma. So therefore, the truma of the second partner is valid for his share because the first guy didn't give a sufficient amount, and the second guy doesn't want to rely on that. Mishnah Dalet. Bamed Nurim. In what case are the words of Rabbi Akiva stated that both of the trumas are valid? Diber. That this ruling applies only when the first partner did not speak to his partner and get his permission to separate truma for his share. Aval hirsha es ben beso o es avdo o es shivchasu litrum. But if one gave permission to his partner or even to a member of his household or to his servant or his maidservant, whether they're Jewish or not, to separate truma, truma, then his truma, meaning the portion that's separated by the appointed person, is a valid truma. Betel, if he canceled the permission that he gave, then the law is as follows. Im taram betel. If he canceled the permission before the other person separated the truma, ein truma to truma. His truma is not valid. Taram betel. But if he canceled the permission after the other person had already separated truma to truma, then his truma is valid. So now we're going to talk about a worker separating truma for the produce of his employer. Hapoalim ein lehen reshus litrum. The workers do not have permission to separate truma for their employer's produce. Chutz min hadruchos, except for workers who are chaverim, the people who are, as I said many times, that a chaver is someone who's very careful not to become tamei, and they were hired by an amaretz to tread on the grapes in his wine press. In that case, it's clear that he wants them to separate truma for him, so that the truma does not become tamei. Because and that they should separate the truma when they start treading the grapes, because the owner will touch it and make it all tamei, make the entire wine press tamei. That's going to be a big problem. So therefore, they have the right and the opportunity to get truma from the owner's produce when they're chaverim, but the owner is not. Continuing on Mishnah Hey, Omer Trumas Hakri. One says the truma of this pile is inside it. Or he says that its maasers are inside it. Trumas maaser is ebisocho. Or he says that the trumas maaser of this pile is inside it. The law is subject to the following dispute. Rabbi Shimon says, Kara Shem, he has made a binding declaration, meaning that since he said that the truma or maaser will come from a specific part of the pile, then his statement is binding. And he may later separate truma only from inside the pile and not from the outer layer or anywhere else. The Chachamim say, his declaration is not binding until he says something more specific, such as the truma on this pile is on its northern side or it's on its southern side. He's then limited to designating truma from the side of the pile that he had previously named. So a third view, Eliezer Chisma says, Homer Chumas Akri Imanu Allah, that one says that the truma of the pile is to be taken from it for the rest of it. Karashem, he has made a binding declaration. According to this Tana, it is not necessary to specify any particular part of the pile. Rabbi Eliezer ben Yaakov, Rabbi Eliezer ben Yaakov says, Omer Isur Meister Zeh, also Trumas maaser love. If one says that a tenth of this maaser rishon is hereby made trumas maaser for it, karashem, he has made a binding declaration. According to this Tana, the trumas maaser can be designated only for maaser rishon and not from ordinary tevel. He also holds that there's no need to specify part of the pile, rather a simple reference to a tenth is enough. Mishnah Vav. Hamaktin Truma the Bikurim. Someone designated Truma before Bikurim. It's really the proper order of separation is Bikurim is first, because Bikurim go to the base of Mikdash, then it's Truma Gedola, then it's Maaser Rishon, and Maaser Sheni and Maaser Ani is last. It's funny how Bikurim is the last Masechta in Zrayim, and after you do all the other ones, then Bikurim is last. You would think that this is the order of how it's supposed to go. And you should do Bikurim first, and then Truma, and then Maaser, and then Maaser Sheni. In that order, but it's not. So I'm marked in Truma the Bikurim. There's someone designated Truma before Bikurim. Maaser Rishon Truma, or Maaser Rishon before giving Truma. Maaser Sheni Rishon, or he gave Maaser Sheni before he gave Maaser Rishon. Afal Pishu over below Sase. You know he violated a derisive prohibition. Masha also what he nevertheless what he did was done, and the separation is kosher. Shenemar, as it says in the pasuk in I think it's Mishpatim, do not delay your bikurim or your truma. So therefore, get it done. So if it's not done correctly, okay, it's a lav, but it still counts. And moving on to Mr. Zayim, Uminayin, Shiyakadnu Habikurim Truma. So where do we know that Bikurums are separated before Truma? Zekare Truma races, Zekare Truma races. After all, Bikurim is called by the Torah Truma and also first, and that Truma is also called Truma and first. So what's the difference between them? Why should one become the other one? We see in Devarim that Bikurim in probably Akev or probably Akev that the Bikurim is referred to as Trumas Yadcha, and it's also as racist in Mishpatim. But and in Truma, it's called Truma Sai, and it's also called racist the Gancha, which is the first of your grain. So how do you know which one is first? Ella Yikadnu Bikurim. Nevertheless, Bikurim should be separated first. Shehein Bikurim Lakol, because their very name Bikurim implies that they are the first ones of all. The first of all the matanos. And continuing on, Truma the Rishon, and the Truma becomes before Maaser Rishon. She races, because Truma is called first by the Torah, and Maaser Rishon is not. Maaser Rishon is Sheni, and Maaser Rishon comes before Maaser Sheni. She Yeshbo races because Maaser Rishon contains Trumas Maaser, which can be called first because it is a form of Truma. Mishnah Ches. Hamiskavi in Lomar Truma v'Amar Maaser. If someone separated a portion of the crop and intended to say that it's Truma, but mistakenly said it was Maaser, maaser v'amar truma, or if he intended to say maaser but mistakenly said truma, ola ola v'amar shlamim, or if he meant to say ola for a korban but mistakenly said that it was a shlamim, shlamim v'amar ola, or if he meant to say shlamim but said ola by mistake, she'eni nechlas avaya zeh v'amar zeh, or someone intended to say that I swear I will not enter this house, but mistakenly said this house, referring to a different house, or if someone intended to say, I will not have benefit from the property of this person, and mistakenly said this person, said that person, lo amar klum. In all these cases, he has said nothing. Ad she yupiv until because until his mouth and his mind match up to the same thing, then what he says is not legally binding. And finally, Mishnah Test, Ha'oved Kochavim Kusi, an idolater and a Kusi. Terumos and Truma, their Truma is a valid Truma. Maaser say and maaser, and their maasers are valid maaser. The hekdesh and hekdesh, and they're consecrating an animal to the base of Mikdash is a valid consecration. Rabbi Yehuda says, "Ein avik kamravai." The idolater is not subject to the laws of kamravai from a vineyard. The Chachamim say, "Yesh though, no, they have kamravai." So the First explained that Rabbi Yehuda is not referring to the Kamravai of Eretz Yisrael proper, because we already said elsewhere that land that's owned by a non-Jew in Eretz Yisrael is fully sacred. Rather, he's referring to land in Syria, which is to the north of Eretz Yisrael, which was in Machlokas as to what the status was. Terumah ha'ove kochavim v'damas. Terumah ha'ove kochavim v'damas. That is, if the terumah of an idolater falls into ordinary produce, it makes the mixture meduma, and chayavim alei chomesh. And non-kohanim are obligated to pay the extra fifth for the sin of eating it by mistake. So idolatrous truma is kosher doraisa and is therefore treated like regular truma in every respect. Rabbi Shimon says that someone who ate it by mistake is parted from paying the extra fifth, although he does agree that it makes the produce meduma. According to Rabbi Shimon, the idolatrous truma is only recognized under the Rabbanan law and not and therefore the Chachamim did not impose the penalty of the extra fifth in this case. Thank you for joining us, and we'll see you tomorrow for Perek Dalet. Have a wonderful day.